The elevator doors groaned open with a sound that felt far too alive for machinery, like the strained inhale of something that had been sleeping for too long and had finally awakened at your arrival. Most nights, you step into elevators without thinking. Another dull moment in a world full of routine. But tonight feels different from the moment your shoes cross the threshold. The lights flicker with a sickly glow, the metallic walls breathe cold against your skin, and though no one stands behind you, you can feel the weight of presence. Not a person, something quieter. Something older. You press the button, expecting the gentle descent you felt 1,000 times. But instead the elevator rises slowly, dragging your stomach higher with each passing floor. The panel flickers past 6, 7, 8. Then hesitates. You swallow hard. The air feels heavier. The number 12 appears in a stuttering blink, before vanishing into black. A pause that feels like a heartbeat stretched too thin. And then 13 burns onto the screen in a color that looks almost alive. A number that shouldn't exist. A floor the building was never meant to have. The doors slide open, as if pulled by unseen hands, and that is where the stories begin. In the spaces that were never meant to be found. In the floors that exist only when something wants them to exist. In the places where fear and wisdom meet like old lovers. Every horror story hidden inside the 13th floor carries not only terror, but truth lessons wrapped in shadows, warnings delivered through dread, and inspirations forged in the deepest chills of the unknown. You may feel fear tonight, but beneath it, there is meaning waiting to rise within you. Trust what your soul senses long before your eyes understand. That is the first truth, and perhaps the most important one. Long before we see danger, we feel it. Long before a mistake unfolds, we sense the subtle pull toward or away. The soul knows. The spirit warns. But modern life teaches us to silence those whispers, to ignore chills, to rationalize the unexplainable. Yet the story of Azim, the quiet maintenance worker who encountered a floor that should never have existed, reminds us why we must listen. Azim knew every sigh of that old building. He walked its halls like a man reading lines of familiar poetry. There was nothing he hadn't heard before, no noise, no smell, no vibration that didn't make sense to him. Until that night, the night the building exhaled a breath he had never heard. He stepped into the elevator with his toolkit, expecting the usual mechanical groans. Instead, he felt something soft brush against the back of his neck, like the cold fingertip of a child trying to get his attention. His heart hammered. The lights buzzed. His instincts screamed. But his mind told him there had to be a logical explanation. So he pressed the button. And that was where logic abandoned him. The elevator ascended instead of descending, passing floors that were never part of the building's design. 11, 12. Then a trembling nothingness, before the flickering emergence of 13. The doors opened not to a hallway, but to a corridor swallowed in darkness, stretching like a throat waiting to swallow something warm. A faint flickering bulb blinked at the far end, illuminating what looked like the smeared outline of footprints bare, small, wet. Azim felt the air around him tighten, like invisible hands gripping his shoulders, urging him forward. He knew without understanding that whatever waited beyond those doors was not meant for the living. His eyes saw an empty hall, but his soul saw something else. Something staring back. Something patient. And so, with instinct roaring louder than fear, he slammed the buttons in a frenzy, whispering prayers in a voice unsteady with terror. The elevator did not close right. A weight hesitated, resisting him, as if something unseen wanted him to step out just 1 inch more. But his prayers grew louder, his hands firmer, and finally the doors snapped shut with a violent metallic clank. The elevator plummeted, shaking violently as if something was clawing at its sides. Azim fell to his knees, gripping the rail, feeling tears burn his eyes. Then, suddenly, inexplicably, the motion stopped. The doors opened to the perfectly normal lobby. Bright lights, warm air. A bored guard sipping tea, as if nothing had happened. But Azim knew better. He walked away from the elevator and never returned. He didn't need to. He had already learned what he was meant to learn. That intuition is not fear, it is protection, it is survival. And when something inside you whispers leave, stop, don't go there, that voice deserves your trust. Courage is choosing to move even when fear freezes your spine. That truth belongs to a young woman in Chicago who stepped out onto a 13th floor that looped endlessly like a maze built from nightmares. The walls seemed to breathe. The lights flickered like dying stars, and every time she passed a mirror, her reflection lagged behind, not glitching, watching. Her fear begged her to stand still, to scream, to collapse on the cold floor and surrender to the nightmare. But she walked. Step after trembling step, and because she moved, because she refused to let fear turn her into prey, she finally reached the real, familiar hallway. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the insistence to move while fear tries to chain you down. Some doors are closed for your protection, not your punishment. An office worker in Tokyo, curious and reckless, forced open the sealed 13th floor of his company building. Inside, he found only dust and a chair facing the elevator warm to the touch, as if someone had just left seconds before he arrived. When he stepped fully inside, the elevator doors slammed shut behind him. Not angrily, not violently, simply decisively, as if something said, "You were not meant to be here." He sat in silence for hours, unable to leave until the doors reopened on their own. Sometimes the things we chase are the very things we are being shielded from. Loneliness becomes dangerous when we forget our own worth. A widower in Dubai rode the elevator late at night, convinced that his wife's shadow waited on the forbidden 13th floor. He missed her so deeply that he convinced himself the flickering figure with her silhouette was a sign, not a warning. One night, he stayed too long. The cold of that floor seeped into his bones, and he collapsed. When he awoke, he was shaking uncontrollably on the 12th floor hallway, rescued by neighbors. His grief had opened a spiritual doorway, but not one meant for him to follow. His survival was a reminder that the living belong to the living, and healing begins when we choose ourselves. Evil often disguises itself as familiarity. A traveler in Bangkok stepped into an elevator late at night, and was joined by a woman who looked exactly like his sister. Same smile, same voice, same warmth. But his sister had died 3 years earlier. When she gently asked him to walk her to her room, he felt a cold dread curl inside him, even as her face radiated comfort. When he refused, the lights flickered violently and she disappeared in a breath of icy wind. Familiarity can be the mask of danger. Discernment is our first defense. Hope shines brightest where logic dies. A nurse in Russia found herself trapped between the 12th and phantom 13th floors. No buttons worked. The elevator was chokingly cold. Her flashlight flickered out. Her phone died. But instead of panicking, she prayed, whispered psalms in the dark, held on to the thin thread of hope. After what felt like an eternity, the elevator moved downward with a gentle hum, stopping safely on the ground floor. Sometimes hope is the only light strong enough to change the outcome. Resilience means refusing to belong to the darkness, calling your name. A teenager in Toronto challenged his friends to explore the abandoned 13th floor of a decaying hotel. But the floor was not abandoned. Something grabbed his ankle and dragged him across the dusty tiles toward a room with a door slightly ajar. He screamed, clawed at the floor, kicked violently until the grip loosened. He crawled back to the elevator, sobbing, but alive. Resilience is not never falling, it is fighting with everything inside you until the darkness has no choice but to let go. Light chooses those who choose themselves. In Seoul, a night shift security guard encountered a flickering figure standing by the emergency exit of the 13th floor. It whispered his name with a softness that felt far too intimate to be human. He should have run. He should have screamed, but instead, he lifted his flashlight, pointed it directly at the figure, and stepped forward with steady breath. The figure vanished instantly, melting into the shadows like a lie exposed. Light appears most powerfully for those who choose not to abandon themselves to fear. All these stories, all these trembling encounters with the unseen, whispered the same deeper truths. You are guided, protected, stronger than you realize. You carry light inside you, even when you walk through places soaked in darkness. The world is full of hidden floors, moments when life takes you to places you didn't plan to visit, rooms you never wanted to enter, fears you never imagined you'd face. But every 13th floor, whether physical or symbolic, carries a lesson meant for your soul. Tonight, as you listen to these stories, may you feel not just the fear, but the strength rising within you. May you trust the quiet warnings inside you. May you choose courage when everything around you trembles. May you remember that darkness cannot claim the heart that chooses hope. And may every unseen danger pass you by, every shadow dissolve, and every step of your journey be guided by protection, clarity, and a light that nothing can extinguish.